With all of the noise that we've seen across the political spectrum these last couple of years, it's amazing to think the fact that the biggest actor on the political stage has also been the most quiet, and I'm of course talking about Robert Mueller III. Across the span of the entire special investigation into Russian influence in the 2016 election, Mueller only made a couple of statements publicly, and it looks like this past week he may have made his final statement. This past Wednesday, the former special counsel had a very brief public statement. And this statement, while it was only 8 minutes long, sent everybody out to their political corners faster than my friend Brian gets sent to the friend zone when he has a crush on somebody. Sorry, Brian. Wednesday morning, it was announced the fact that Robert Mueller was going to give a speech, and late on Wednesday morning, he gave that very speech, and it was essentially a resignation. It was a very short speech, as I mentioned, only about 8 minutes, and in the very first paragraph, Mueller announced his return to the private life and the fact that he was going to be closing the special counsel's office. Throughout the speech, Mueller gave some insights into the investigation. He outlined, of course, the reason for the investigation and a little bit of his findings. He took some time and outlined the reason that he was also looking into obstruction right away instead of waiting to see if there was an underlying crime or not. He took some time and gave some reasons for the fact that he was not going to be bringing up any indictments against the president or anybody in the president's campaign team. And he talked about the next steps that the government should take should they want to use the information that was enclosed in the special counsel's report. The speech was very straightforward. It wasn't long enough for anybody to take a lot of interpretations out of it. But I was very amazed throughout the next day when I started hearing all of the takeaways from the speech from all of the different wings of politics in the United States. I've been listening to commentary on this speech from legitimately the moment that it ended, and that's something that's almost inevitable in this country, given the fact that we spent so much time and treasure on this one investigation. For the last 3 years, it has been one of the most important parts of American politics. The first reactions that I saw, of course, came from CBS because that was the live stream that I chose to watch the speech from. A person listening solely to commentary would never believe that all of the pundits, Twitter users, or anybody else who's commented on this speech were all listening to the same speech, because there were so many takeaways that came from just one small 8-minute speech. Mainstream media sources, of course, like CBS, CNN, and NBC, are swearing up and down that this speech meant the end for the presidency. Twitter trended "Impeach Trump Now" almost immediately following the speech, and most of the tweets were citing the fact that Mueller said that he could not definitively say that Donald Trump was innocent in Russian collusion. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a different video because this also coincides with a Supreme Court decision that was just handed down that the news has almost completely ignored. Many of the MAGA fans over on Twitter have looked at this speech as well, and they've called it proof that the government needs to be investigated itself almost endlessly. Not the president's office or the executive branch, of course, but the rest of the government needs to be investigated so we can essentially take some time and drain that swamp. One of the most interesting and possibly the most factual takeaways that I got on this speech came from Ben Shapiro's show. Shapiro took some time and played the entire speech on his show, stopping every few sentences to comment on the point that was made just instantly before, and I think that's a good way to make sure that you get all of the information on it. I've linked a Vox article below that has the full transcript of Mueller's speech written down, and I do recommend taking some time and reading that as well. It's always best to get the information straight from the source. But Shapiro looked at this, and he looked at the speech, and the way that he saw it playing out was the fact that the Department of Justice has exhausted all of the angles, and Mueller is saying that now all of this is on Congress to do something. Whether or not they're going to do that depends on what they can do in the Democrat Party over in Congress, but for the most part, Mueller is saying that it's time for the Department of Justice to step away from this. Shapiro also went on to claim the fact that Mueller was using this speech as a way to sidestep having a testimony in front of Congress and sitting in front of the House of Representatives for 6, 8, or even 12 hours while they took some time and each one of them stood up and questioned Mueller in their own specific talking points. The final and the most interesting takeaway that I got from this came from Styx Hexenhammer 666. I don't need to talk about Styx's entire video, it's very factual, and I will link it in the description below as well. But Styx opened his video with his main point. Mueller was trolling everybody who was against the president at this point, as he was saying that the special counsel's office was closed and that he was retiring. Now, I don't know if that was necessarily the case. I have read the speech, and I don't know if this was necessarily a troll. But it's interesting to find somebody who can look at the same speech I did and get that out of that speech. Before I close this video, I do have to give my own takeaway from the speech because I listened to it live and I read it several times in transcript form afterwards. And the first thing that I took away from this was a sense of shock by the fact that it even happened. As I said in the beginning of the video, Mueller was very quiet throughout the entire investigation. He only spoke to the public a handful of times, and having this big retirement speech at the end of it seemed a little bit out of character. Yes, given the fact that we were all watching him with bated breath for 3 years, means that maybe he did have to come out and say that yes, he was going to, but it just seemed completely out of character at the time. One of the things that I noticed while I was reading through this is the fact that Mueller was laying out and summarizing many parts of his investigation, and I think there's a reason for that. In all honesty, I don't think a lot of Americans have the attention span to sit down and read the redacted form of the Mueller report. I think a lot of people have said that they're going to and said that they have, but I don't think so many of them have. Most of what people know about the report came from the pundits that many of these people follow from one side or the other. The words of Mueller have been twisted, sanitized, and reread in a way that fits the narrative of whatever pundit is reporting on that. And Mueller made this speech, in a sense, to make sure that his words were out there from his voice. Because, of course, everybody was going to sit back and report on the fact that he was making the speech. They were all waiting for him to say that it was time to impeach Trump, or that he was going to lay down an indictment, or that he was going to clear the president and there was no need to worry about anything else. So, this was a chance to make sure that his voice was heard, not a pundit's voice quoting him. The one paragraph in there that everyone seemed to latch right onto is the fact that Mueller said that he could not say that Trump was innocent, and if he could, he would have come out and said that. As I said before, I'm going to make a longer form video on this concept, but everyone in this country is guaranteed presumed innocence. It's one of the founding principles of our country. So I want to make sure that this is pointed out, and this was wrong of Mueller. It was not his job to presume the guilt of somebody and try to prove his innocence. Trump is presumed innocent. Matt Walsh talked about the fact that he thought that everything with the special counsel's office was over at this point. He was ready to stop talking about it, and he was very surprised and angry with the fact that he was going to have to talk about it again on Wednesday morning. But I don't know if this means that it's over. I don't know if we're going to be talking about it again, and I don't know if it's going to be brought up in an impeachment hearing. Half of the Democrat Party is saying impeach, and half of them are saying that it's not politically viable to do so, but we will have to wait and see. But Godspeed out to Mueller, and I hope that he enjoys the rest of his retirement in the private sector. What did you take away from Mueller's speech, and which pundits do you believe got it right? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comments section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel, and remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.